You step outside, the air doesn't feel cold, it bites. It cuts straight into your lungs and every breath comes back out as a cloud of white. There's no coat from a store, no heated room waiting behind you, no four walls, just frozen ground in every direction, a wind that never stops and a sky the color of old bone. This isn't a movie, this isn't some survival challenge you signed up for. For tens of thousands of years, this was home. This was the world your ancestors woke up in every single morning, in a place where getting the night wrong meant you didn't see the morning. The temperature out there could drop to 40 below, and somehow, with no machines, no electricity, no idea what a thermostat was, they lived, not for a season, for 100,000 years. So how did they do it? And here's what nobody tells you about the cold. Surviving it wasn't luck, it wasn't toughness. It was technology, a stack of inventions so clever that you're still carrying pieces of it today. There's even one tool in this story, smaller than your little finger, that may have decided which humans lived and which ones vanished forever. Stay with me because we'll get to that one. Let's start with just how brutal this world really was. Picture the planet 20,000 years ago. We call it the last glacial maximum, the deep freeze, the coldest point of the last ice age. Sheets of ice nearly 2 miles thick sat on top of where London and New York are now. The whole planet was only about 5 or 6 degrees colder on average, which sounds like nothing, until you realize that tiny shift buried half a continent under ice. And in the places humans actually lived, the winters were savage. Picture 20, 30, 40 degrees below zero. Picture a wind with nothing to stop it, screaming across open tundra for hundreds of miles. No heating, no coats from a store, no four walls, just you, your body, and whatever you were smart enough to build before the sun went down. But they didn't just survive it, they figured it out. The first weapon against the cold was the oldest one we have: fire. But forget the cozy campfire in your head. Out there, fire wasn't comfort. Fire was the line between living and dying. A good fire could pull the temperature around your body up by 30 or 40 degrees. It dried your soaked clothes, it kept the predators back, it turned frozen meat into something your stomach could actually use. So you didn't let it go out, ever. Think about what that really means. Somebody had to keep that fire alive through the entire night, feeding it, shielding it from the wind, banking the coals so they'd still be glowing at dawn. People took shifts. Children were taught to guard it like their life depended on it, because it did. In a world this cold, with wet wood and a storm rolling in, restarting a dead fire could take hours you didn't have. Lose the fire on the wrong night, and the whole group could freeze before sunrise. But fire alone couldn't save you, not out there, because fire stays in one place and you can't. Which brings us to the thing that really changed everything: clothing. Now your first thought is probably simple: they threw an animal skin over their shoulders, right? A big fur cape, caveman style. But that's the part people get completely wrong. A loose hide draped over you is almost useless in a real ice age winter. The wind just slides up underneath it and steals all your heat. To actually survive 40 below, you don't need fur, you need fitted clothing. Layers, sleeves that close at the wrist, seams that lock the warm air in against your skin. And to make that, you need to do something no animal on Earth had ever done: you need to sew. This is where one of the most underrated inventions in human history shows up. The eyed needle, a sliver of bone with a tiny hole drilled through one end. The oldest ones we've found are around 40 to 50,000 years old, from places like Denisova Cave in Siberia. It looks like nothing. It looks like a splinter. But that little hole let humans pull a thread of animal sinew through hide and stitch it tight, turning flat skins into tailored coats, trousers, boots, and hoods. We even have proof of just how layered ancient clothing could get. Otzi the Iceman, frozen in the Alps for over 5,000 years, was found wearing a goat hide coat, leggings, a bearskin hat, and shoes stuffed with dry grass for insulation. Layer on layer on layer. That wasn't fashion. That was a survival system worn on the body. And this tiny tool, the needle, may have decided which humans lived and which ones disappeared. Because there's a chilling possibility hiding in this story, and it's about the Neanderthals. We tend to picture Neanderthals as the ones built for the cold, and in a way they were. Their bodies were shorter, stockier, with barrel chests and shorter arms and legs, a shape that holds onto heat the same way a thick mug stays warm longer than a thin glass. Biologically, they were better armored against the freeze than we were. They were strong. They were tough. They had survived in Ice Age Europe long before our kind ever showed up. So why are they gone and we're still here? Nobody knows for sure, but here's one idea that gives anthropologists chills. When you look at the tools, eyed needles show up again and again with Homo sapiens, and they're strangely rare with Neanderthals. Some researchers think Neanderthals never developed the same fine, tailored clothing that we did. Looser clothes, more heat leaking out, a little more energy burned just staying warm every single day for thousands of years. This isn't about who was stronger. This isn't about who was smarter. This is about who could sew. In a world where the cold never stopped testing you, the group with better stitching might quietly win, not in a battle but in a slow war of warmth measured over generations. A needle, that's it. That might be part of the difference between a species that ended and the one reading these words. But clothing and fire still weren't enough to make it through the night. Because when the temperature crashes and the wind turns into a blade, you need one more thing. You need somewhere to hide. And out on the open tundra there were no caves, no forests full of timber, so they did something incredible. They built houses out of the dead. In Mezherych, in modern-day Ukraine, archaeologists found the remains of shelters made almost entirely from mammoth bones. We're talking around 150 bones in a single hut, massive jaws stacked into walls, tusks curving over the doorway, the whole thing framed from the skeletons of the largest animals these people ever hunted. And it was genius. They dig the floor down below ground level where the earth itself blocks the worst of the wind and holds a little heat. The bones made a frame. Hides and turf were stretched over the top. Inside, with a fire going and bodies packed close, that bone house could stay livable while the world outside dropped to a temperature that would kill you in under an hour. Imagine being a child falling asleep inside a dome of mammoth bone, the wind howling against walls made from the very animal that fed your family. That was home. And inside that bone house, there was one more trick keeping them alive. Fat. We think of fat as the thing we try to burn off at the gym, but in the Ice Age, animal fat was one of the most valuable substances on Earth. It was three things at once, and all three kept you alive. First, it was food, pure energy. When it's 40 below, your body is burning fuel just to keep your heart beating, and fatty meat from a reindeer or a mammoth delivered the dense calories you needed to generate your own heat from the inside. Second, it was light and warmth. They carved shallow bowls out of stone, filled them with animal fat dropped in a wick, and made lamps. We found these stone lamps in caves like Lascaux in France, still stained with grease after 17,000 years. A little flame-burning animal fat pushing back the dark, taking the edge off the freezing air. No electricity, no gas, no wood half the time, just a stone, a flame, and the fat of the animals they hunted turned into light. But the strangest survival tool in this whole story wasn't a tool at all. It was the human body itself. Because living in extreme cold for thousands of years didn't just change what people built, it started to change them. Your body has a hidden defense against the cold built right in. When you start to freeze, you shiver, and that shaking isn't random. It's your muscles firing on purpose to generate heat. You also have something called brown fat, a special kind of tissue that does one job. It burns energy purely to keep you warm, like a furnace stitched into your own flesh. Babies are full of it, and people who live in the cold tend to hold onto more of it. Look at the human groups who still live in some of the harshest cold on the planet today, like the Inuit of the Arctic. Their bodies, their diets rich in fat, the way they trap heat, they're a living window into the strategies that carried our ancestors through the Ice Age. The cold shaped the people, and the people who survived passed those traits down. Down a line that runs unbroken all the way to you. So how did ancient humans stay warm through the Ice Age? Not with one miracle, with a system: fire they never let die, clothing they sewed tight to the body, houses built from the bones of giants, fat turned into food and fire and light, and a body that slowly learned to fight the cold from the inside out. It wasn't luck, it was the smartest, most stubborn survival engineering the world had ever seen, invented from nothing, by people with no books, no teachers, and no second chances. And that little needle, that sliver of bone with a hole in it, it might just be one of the quiet reasons you exist at all. Here's the part worth sitting with. Tonight when you're cold, you'll press a button. The room will warm up. You won't even think about it. But every ancestor in your line had to invent warmth out of nothing and survive long enough to pass their fire and their genes on to the next one. You are the end of a 100,000-year winning streak against the cold. So let me ask you, be honest. Would you have survived one single night out there, 40 below, no coat, no walls, just you in the dark? Tell me down in the comments. And if this rewired the way you see that thermostat on your wall, subscribe. There's a whole world of this hiding in our past and we're just getting warmed up.